a lot of not to use words that I can't to get this show cancelled, but there's a lot of things that goes on at those type of social gatherings because when it comes to the recruitment of people into Satanism, they try to impress you with as much indulgence and different things as possible. So there's a lot of things that happen at those socials and in those environments that won't happen at, let's say, an average Saturday night out type of party. So I can say that. And then there's usually a room at those parties where there is rituals going on behind closed doors and people can go into those rooms if they want to, but it's not required at a social that you must partake in the ritual. So it's not like a gathering for the purpose of ritual, but there was always at every satanic social gathering, especially at during the time at my house eventually, and during the times that I went to the homes of the other co-founders of the organization, there was always satanic rituals and other things going on in certain rooms of the space that anybody that was a guest there could go and partake in.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, and thanks for keeping the language clean, because YouTube comes down on us.
Exactly. Now I have experience.
Yeah. So, all right. So the next step then you said was your own initiation in a satanic ritual. I assume that was the first satanic ritual for you. Could you detail the initiation ritual, please?
As much as I can, I will. I just again want to look at my list of words that I was sent. So let me put it this way: the initiation ritual is probably the most vanilla one that you will go through as a Satanist that joins an organization. So nothing too intense. But what happens is there's certain steps that every satanic ritual follows. So initiation rituals is basically in front of as many witnesses that are Satanists already and have been for a while, that you dedicate yourself to that path. There's usually blood that is drawn from your left hand specifically, and usually there's a contract that you will sign in that blood, and a very big lie and deception that a lot of people go through is that they believe they sell their soul to the devil, which is one of the biggest lies ever, because we can't sell our souls, because our souls doesn't belong to us to begin with. And that is why a lot of people also struggle to get out of Satanism, is because that is kind of held over their head. So besides that, you are also given or assigned a person that you will fall under. So your priest or high priest is assigned to you. Also, your control demon is assigned to you as well, that will be in charge of certain aspects of your spiritual practices. And then there's an invocation that you make, and a declaration where you invoke Satan, and you also invoke certain demons. It's part of that ritual. So obviously for people who understand the spirit world, you can just imagine what happens from there onwards. And like I said, in terms of what happens when we talk about things like sacrifices and other things, that is still not really the hectic stuff. That is just the beginning. And it's only when people want to start climbing the ranks in Satanism that more and more different things get required. And then in my case, I was also taught within the first year how to properly practice SRA. So for the South African Satanic Church, I eventually got to be the person that was seen as the disciplinarian. So whenever a member or a person wanting to leave, or somebody who have done something that the leadership didn't agree with and they had to be disciplined, I was the person that had to enforce that ritual or that practice of SRA, which you can also imagine. And again, I can't talk about that too much in detail because of the platform that we're on at the moment. But so I was very much involved with SRA during my 4 years that I was involved in Satanism, and my 2 years that I was at the leadership of the Satanic Church. And there's still a lot of people who would say that SRA is something that doesn't happen. And yet I have photographic evidence and video recordings of that. And I've also seen from other survivors who've come out of it, who've shared their photographs and video material, that indeed it does happen at satanic gatherings, that those things do take place.
Okay, Riaan, this is really fascinating. Now, at your initiation then, were there certain demons that you connected with at that juncture?
Yes. So I can probably say that before I got initiated into Satanism, because of my experience in the occult, I already had an idea of the demonic and the spirit world, because in the occult you also practice certain rituals where you have to connect with the demonic and you have to do certain invocations. But I think after my initiation in Satanism, it was when the demonic became very much a reality for me. And it's almost like the veil between the worlds became much thinner, and it got to a point where you cannot actually control when demons make contact with you anymore. So before that, you work with certain what we call circles that you cast in rituals, where you try to control how much of the connection and how long you want it with the demonic. And then after my initiation in Satanism, there was almost no more control of when the demonic actually influences me and oppresses me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like, you've got like control over things, but then the forces are just working through you at some point.
Correct.
And then you just got to go with the flow, do you then, when those forces are working through you?
Yes, because if you don't, you also get tortured and hurt. You also get scratched and thrown against walls, and I've experienced things like the burning of like my stomach whenever you disobey. So, and it's also very interesting because in my situation, in my case, I obviously never wanted to seek help to get out of the occult, or I never really wanted to get out of Satanism when I was involved in it. There was no desire for me. I was very happy in Satanism. But other people, when they try to find help to go to a Christian church or to somebody who can possibly assist them, that is when a lot of the times the demons start torturing them so intensely until they break contact with potential people to help them or walk away from the entrance of a church. So those are the realities of people struggling to get out of it.
What were the worst things that happened that you were aware of to those people who were struggling?
Do you mean the people we are currently working with?
No, back then in your life experience.
So when I was involved, firstly, like I said, I had no desire to get out of the occult or out of Satanism because of the power that I experienced, and because of the amount of white powder that was given to me and I had access to, and money and whatever, because of the network of Satanists. So I was, as I said, very happy in that kind of maze, if you want to call it that. But with other people at the time that wanted to leave, they can get tortured. And there's also a thing called astral projection, which a lot of Satanists practice, where they target individuals who want to get out or survivors who have left, where they can activate certain programming or certain demonic practice patterns is the correct word, so that those people can be tortured at times and experience severe psychic attack and emotional attack.
Okay, so earlier you mentioned there was overlap between the Satanic and Masonic communities. How does that work?
So I do not know how it works in other countries, but in South Africa, so two of the co-founders of the South African Satanic Church, who funded Satanism, they were already Freemasons for more than 20 years. And like I said, I saw many Freemasons coming to Satanic rituals once the Satanic Church was set up and running. Um, I do not know firsthand what happens at a Freemason gathering. So I've only been inside Freemason lodges during Satanic rituals, and that doesn't necessarily mean that every Freemason is a Satanist and every Satanist is a Freemason. What I can say, though, if we look at the symbolism in Freemasonry, and we look at Masonic rituals, and we look at Masonic lodges and temples, the symbols is very similar, if not identical, to that is used in the occult. So you have what is known of as loaded objects and charged symbols that has a certain influence over people, and it's all demonic.
So if a ritual is going to be done at a Freemasonic lodge, how would that differ from a normal ritual outside of a Masonic lodge?
Like I said, I do not know. I do not know how they do their rituals because I've never been to a Freemason ritual. I've only known, and I still know, people who are both Freemasons and Satanists, and it's a very easy thing back and forth because of the occult umbrella that it falls under. But I've also spoken to 3 people who left Freemasonry. So I've also assisted them with deliverance and things like that. So they have testified, and they didn't know each other. So the stories they shared with me was identical, of things like blood being drank from a human skull at Freemason rituals, which happens in Satanism as well, that I personally did myself. So I've also drank blood from a human skull when I was involved in Satanism. And that happens in Freemasonry, and the SA of men that happens in Freemasonry. The people who have left Freemasonry have all testified that that is a common practice. Where again, and you see, this is the similar thing. So people join these societies and organizations, and they have no idea what they're getting involved in, and only after a certain level, where you cannot simply walk away, things start happening, and you have to subject yourself to things where you almost have no choice over that.
So people in these communities then, would they gravitate towards one or the other, the Satanists or the Masons, or is there a majority that are doing both?
I won't be able to confirm numbers, but so, like I said, in my time at the South African Satanic Church, when we had rituals, I've met at least more than 100 men who were both Satanists and Freemasons. And I mean, obviously, there's if we look at it from a, let's call, percentage, there's way more people, way more men who are Masons or Freemasons than 100 people in South Africa. But so I literally met just over 100 specific Satanists who were also Freemasons. And it is also because in South Africa, up to a certain point, and probably still today, Satanism is practiced very much underground. And it is done a lot of times in secret. And because certain people are involved that don't want to be exposed for that, a Freemason lodge is probably the most likely or closest they can get to practicing rituals. And like I said, because of the symbols and because of the actual ritual component of Freemasonry, it gels very well because it very much falls under the same umbrella if we look at the occult and occult practices.
All right, so within those communities, then, would the satanic rituals be considered more powerful than the Masonic, or vice versa? Or if you participated in both demonic and Masonic, would you have like twice the power? Would the power be compounded?
I think they would perceive it that way. Um, since I've been freed and redeemed from the occult, I can definitely say there's no difference. If you're involved with those things, you're involved in the same thing. But when you are there, you might perceive it that way, because the whole desire and chase and need is for power and influence and to have as much access to things as possible. So because I've experienced something completely different when I met Christ, I can say that obviously everything that is practiced under the umbrella of the occult or under the demonic sphere, or when it comes to demonic practices, it's all the same thing, whether you are actually practicing as a new age practitioner or a holistic healer, or you go to a satanic ritual, or you go to a Freemason lodge. It all falls under the same sphere. And that's why I said at the beginning of this interview, there's only two things in the spirit world. It's the kingdom of God, and it's everything else.
Okay, and earlier on, I just want to touch on something that you said, just to emphasize this for the viewers. Earlier on, you said it's not tattooed young people going out doing graffiti. It is people from the top levels of society. Would that be like business executives, politicians, doctors, that kind of caliber?
Yes. So the majority of Satanists around the world are actually much older. So because they've been involved with Satanism for a longer time. So if you would break up Satanism in ages, if you want to call it age groups, the majority of satanic members or people who belong to a satanic organization, the bigger ones around the world, they have been for years. So they're already in their early 50s and upwards. And obviously, there's also young people that's been recruited into Satanism daily, but the majority of its members are much older people, and they blend very well into society, and they have been for years, without people suspecting. Because the truth of the matter is, we're living in a society where everything is taken on face value or at face value. So if you look like a good, clean citizen that have a successful job, or you're in the medical field or whatever, or you're a teacher, nobody would even think that of you. But that is the whole point. And that is why it's blended so well in society, and why we find Satanism in all aspects of society and all aspects of the professional and corporate world as well.
So would you say that presently our world leaders are involved in it?
So I cannot speak for other countries. I can only speak from my experience and from what I've seen of people that I've met. So again, when it comes to our, let's call them members of parliament. So I'm not talking about the president. I'm talking about members of parliament. There's at least more than 25% that is involved in Satanism, and like I said, even more so that is involved in occult practices, because they go to people who practice witchcraft for them, and they attend rituals where there's animal sacrifice and where they get to use medicine or muti made from human body parts and animal body parts. So that is the reality that I know and that I've been exposed to, and people I've met and can testify to from firsthand. So I cannot tell you with 100% conviction that the world leaders are Satanists. No. I can say, though, that the Satanists that I've met from overseas, like from the US and in the UK and in Ireland specifically and in the East, are people of power and more to do with the financial systems of their country and the banking system than necessarily government. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, it really does. You're doing brilliantly. I'm mesmerized by your account. So you mentioned muti. Where are the materials for muti sourced from?
Okay, so I'm going to talk again according to the codes as much as possible as I can. So in South Africa, every 5 hours, there's a missing child reported. That is our current status. Okay. So over the last 6 years, out of the thousands of children who went missing, just over 40% have been found alive, and then just under 20% body parts have been found or remains. The rest is nowhere to be found, no traces. Okay, so many of those children are sold for the purpose of muti and making these medicines. The police detective and inspector that I assist from time to time told me last week there's more than 7,000 cold cases at the moment of missing children where there's no trace of them. Just children in the last 10 years who've gone missing. And many of them are connected to SRA and trafficking and CA and CP and those type of things. Now, muti is also then made not just from human body parts, but also animal body parts. So when I was involved with traditional healing for that period 2010 to 2012, I used to go to a muti market in Durban that have thankfully flooded by now, so it's not in existence anymore. The amount of body parts there of animals is insane. And whether it being wild birds, hyenas, rhinos, um, pieces of lions, the list is endless. So muti is made from a combination of human parts, animal parts, and herbs.
Good grief. Okay, so when the muti is in the ritual, what, how is it dispensed or utilized?
Okay, so again, the reason this exists is because there's money behind it. So if people didn't pay for this, it wouldn't be happening. So let's say you have a client that comes to you and say they want to look young for the rest of their lives. That would determine what type of muti is used. Or a person comes to you and say they are in a financial bind and they want to make a certain amount of money in a short period of time. Other parts are used for that. So the parts and ingredients is determined by the outcome. So if we look at witchcraft, and I can do a whole day's conversation about this. So because witchcraft, as you practice it, you get better at it. And we have to remember the occult. The very term occult means hidden knowledge. So the occult is not something you can go and read about on the internet or in books. That will only show you how to do certain things. You have to practice the occult to get more knowledge of it and more insight. So in the 15 years that I practiced the occult full time is where you learn the most, because demons give you instructions of what is needed. Now, witchcraft works like alchemy. So it's the perfect combination of certain things that determines the outcome, if that makes sense. So you have to perform rituals and certain steps using certain ingredients, like I said, that involves either blood or animal parts, herbal medicine, um, plants, sometimes soil, sometimes water from the sea, whatever gets mixed, and it's determined or it depends on what you want the outcome to be. I just don't also want to teach people how to be witches when I do these conversations. So, but just to give you an idea of what determines what parts gets used.
And the person who's commissioned the muti, do they eat it or what?
No, so it doesn't always get imbibed. Sometimes things are hanged from the inside of ceilings. Sometimes it's placed outside a house. Sometimes it's placed under people's beds. Sometimes it's placed in people's cars. Sometimes it's placed in businesses, in the roof or in a drawer of a desk. Sometimes people wear it in their shoes. Sometimes you cook it in a meal and you feed it to another person. So again, it depends on why it is commissioned.
Good grief. All right. So you said it gets way darker as you go up the hierarchy, the satanic ladder for people who want to progress. So could you take us up the ladder?
Could you ask it in another? Or I think, let me answer it what I think. Like, I'll answer it
with just step by step. What is each progression as you're ascending in the satanic community?
Okay, I understand. So after you initiated, you are known as a postulants. Then there's degrees first before you get to priest or high priest. So there's a first, second, and third degree that you have to go through, and this can take years to complete. So when somebody tells you they've been involved with Satanism for a year or 5 years and they are a high priest, then you know they're talking absolute nonsense, because it doesn't happen that way. So to progress, you have to gain certain information and knowledge and come to an understanding of what that level entails, and you have to prove your skills to climb to the next level. When you climb to the next level, that's where sacrifices happen. So depending on the level that you are being initiated into next, that will determine whether that requires an animal or a human sacrifice. And you then have to perform that ritual in front of witnesses that have gone through the same ritual in their past, if that makes sense. And then the other thing that I wanted to mention as well is that human sacrifice comes much later. So nobody gets involved in Satanism and immediately they're practicing human sacrifices, unless they are in generational Satanism, where children are born into it. Completely different story, because sadly, from a young age, they are forced to drink blood of humans and eat flesh of people's bodies, etc., which leaves quite traumatic marks on children as they become adults. Because in our ministry, we work with quite a lot of people who come from that type of background, which, like I said, is a bit different. And then also in Satanism, there's theistic Satanism and there's atheistic Satanism, which basically comes down to that one group would say that the devil or Satan is a being that is being worshipped, and the other group would actually say that no, it's not a literal being, it's an archetype. And many people start out as atheistic Satanists, where it's about the philosophy and they resonate with the Satanic Bible, until it comes to a point where they have to perform rituals and they are forced to engage in certain things. And like I said, that's when the demonic and Satan becomes very real. And then we move it from atheistic Satanism to theistic Satanism. And it's always just really a stepping stone towards that.
So you're saying then, on the lower rungs, animal sacrifice is required, but nearer the top, human sacrifice is required. So how many years would someone have to be ascending before they reach the human sacrifice level?
So I would say, depending on fast, they can prove themselves to their covens and grottos. But anything between 5 to 10 years on average. The youngest person, or not youngest, but the person that I met that was involved in Satanism for the shortest period of time that got to the level of mage was 4 years, which is a very unlikely thing to see. So myself, for instance, I was only involved in Satanism for a total period of 5 years. I never got to the level of being a priest. So I was a leader by title, by job title of the organization, meaning the admin office or the church office. That was my position. And I used to conduct certain rituals when it came to things like satanic weddings and satanic baptisms and those things. But the people leading actual rituals for groups, they are the high priests and the high priestesses. And they've been involved in Satanism for years. Like, honestly, it's not something that you're not gonna become a satanic priest or high priest overnight. It takes years of practice. And you also need to remember that a lot of this happens in the construct of covens and groups. So you can't call yourself a priest or high priest if you're not leading groups of people.